Because you are just, I mean, you are entirely missing the point here. You're looking at it like it's just some dusty museum piece. But I'm telling you, it is absolutely brilliant. It is properly genius.
You joking? It is completely overhyped. Actually, scratch that. It's not just overhyped. It is rather dull.
Rather dull. Every single massive blockbuster you watch today, every single cinematic universe with the CGI dragons and the brooding anti-heroes standing in front of green screens, I mean, it all stems from this one massive, arrogant, beautiful swing in 1924.
A beautiful swing. You're utterly romanticizing what is essentially a 5-hour, bloated, completely emotionless architectural diagram. It's not even a filmate, it's a furniture exhibition with people just sort of standing around in it.
A furniture exhibition. They built an entire primeval forest indoors. Look, if you were listening to this right now, just forget whatever you are doing, because this is what we are sorting out today. You and me, we are going to dissect the absolute behemoth that is Fritz Lang's 1924 silent epic, Die Nibelungen.
Or attempt to, anyway.
We're pulling our facts straight from the definitive source book on this era, which is
Cinema, the Magic Vehicle, a comprehensive guide. Journey 1, 1913 to 1950.
And my mission today, my singular goal for this entire discussion, is to prove to you that this two-part monstrosity, part one, Siegfried, and part two, Kriemhild's Rache.
Rache. It is Kriemhild's Rache. R-A-H-Q.
Right.
It's German for revenge. Honestly, if you're going to champion a piece of Weimar cinema as the absolute holy grail of storytelling, the least you could do is pronounce the bloody title correctly.
Right. Well, Rache, thank you for that. But the point remains, I am arguing that this film is the secret blueprint for modern cinema. It is the DNA of the blockbuster. And you, my very cynical friend, are actively trying to derail this thesis because you just can't appreciate the sheer, unadulterated spectacle of it all.
I can appreciate spectacle just fine when it actually serves, a human emotion. But this is an artifact. It is an incredibly expensive, studio-funded monument to a nation's ego. I mean, if we actually want to understand why this film exists at all, we have to look at the world they were operating in. You literally cannot talk about Die Nibelungen without talking about the political and economic reality of 1920s Germany. We are talking about the Weimar Republic.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the context is exactly why it is so spot on. You have a nation that is completely decimated. I mean, they are recovering from the absolutely humiliating defeat of the First World War.
Exactly.
The Treaty of Versailles has effectively crippled them, and the economy is a total shambles. We aren't just talking about a mild recession here, right? We are talking about rampant, catastrophic hyperinflation.
And it's crucial to understand the actual mechanics of that hyperinflation, to understand the psychology of the audience sitting in the dark watching this. This isn't just prices went up a bit. This is a scenario where the currency was collapsing so rapidly that workers were being paid twice a day.
Yeah, literally twice a day.
And their spouses would wait at the factory gates to take the cash and literally run to the bakery before the price of bread doubled again. I mean, people were taking wheelbarrows full of practically worthless paper money just to buy basic groceries. Savings were wiped out overnight.
Right. So the national morale is essentially in the gutter. The psychological trauma of the war, combined with this daily terror of an economic freefall, it creates a profound sense of desperation. And what does the German film industry do in the middle of all this chaos? They merge.
A classic corporate panic move.
Decla Bioscope and UFA, the two biggest film companies in the entire country, decide to consolidate their power to create this absolute titan, a literal cinema empire. And they essentially say, right, we need a hit. We need something to remind the German people that we are a mighty culture, not just a defeated, bankrupt state.
Massive distraction is what they actually meant.
No, it was national pride. It was a morale-boosting project on a scale that had literally never been attempted in European cinema before. I mean, the source book makes this brilliant comparison. It says this film became a cinematic icon, right? A source of national pride as quintessentially German as the monument to the Battle of the Nations near Leipzig. And that is exactly what it feels like. It's a monument. Yeah. It's not just a movie. It is a physical pillar of cultural reclamation.
Wait. Hold on a second. That's rubbish, mate. That is completely absurd. Let's actually unpack that Leipzig comparison because it tells you exactly what is fundamentally wrong with this film.
The monument to the Battle of the Nations commemorates October 1813, right? Do you actually know the scale of that event?
Well, it was huge.
Huge is an understatement. It was over 1 million troops. It was the coalition Britain, Russia, Prussia, Austria, Sweden handing Napoleon Bonaparte one of his most decisive, crushing defeats. It was the largest, most devastating battle fought in Europe prior to the First World War. So we are talking about a massive, bloody geopolitical slaughterhouse that determined the fate of global empires. Right, a massive historical pivot point.
And the monument built to commemorate it is a massive, overbearing stone leviathan designed specifically to make the individual feel tiny and completely insignificant. And what do producer Eric Palmer, the director Fritz Lang, and his scriptwriter wife Thea von Harbo do? They look at that imposing, incredibly heavy-handed energy and say, yeah, let's make a film exactly like that.
Because that's what the people needed. They needed scale. They needed to feel part of something larger than their broken, hyperinflated reality.
They needed to put food on the table. Look at the arrogance, the sheer hubris of this project. What is fascinating here is the sheer disconnect between the creators and the reality of the streets. They took a 13th century middle-high German epic poem, the Song of the Nibelungs, which is this dense ancient mythology about Germanic tribes and Attila the Hun conquering Burgundy all the way back in 451 AD.
Classic storytelling.
And they decided to turn that deeply archaic, violent text into a studio movie. I mean, think about the desperation of the era. I ask you, a listener, right now, to just picture it. Imagine you live in a smog-choked, politically volatile, impoverished German city in the early 1920s. Cinema isn't considered high art yet. It's not studied in universities. It's a circus tent.
It was evolving.
It was a cheap, flickering escape from reality. And instead of giving the audience a story with genuine human heart, Lang and Palmer build a literal stone monolith and demand you worship it.
I completely reject the premise that it lacks heart, but even if we just look at it as a stone monolith, what a beautiful, awe-inspiring monolith it is. I mean, here's where it gets really interesting. The technical wizardry alone is completely mental, especially when you consider the mechanics of filmmaking at the time. You have to remember, this is 1924.
I'm well aware of the year.
There are no computers, there are no digital extensions, there is no green screen where an actor performs to a tennis ball on a stick. Everything you see on that screen, they physically built with their own hands. I want to list these masterminds from the book because they genuinely deserve the credit. You have the art directors, Otto Hunte, Karl Vollbrecht, Eric Kettelhut.
Yes, very impressive names.
Costumes by Paul Gerd Guderian, N. Vilcom, Heinrich Umlauf. Makeup by Otto Gnath. And the incredible graphical projects and animation by Walter Rettman.
Yes, congratulations. You can read the credits list from the source book. But what did they actually do with all that talent? How did it translate to the actual screen?
What did they do? They built an entire world indoors. Lang didn't go out into a real forest and wait for the natural sunlight to do right. He built a massive primeval forest inside the UFA studios. They brought in massive tree trunks. They built sprawling cathedrals, massive ships. And this is the absolute kicker. A perfectly credible, life-sized, fire-breathing dragon.
Right, the mechanical toy.
This wasn't a bloke in a cheap rubber suit stomping on cardboard boxes. This was a massive mechanical beast. They had a wooden and canvas frame mounted on a track. They had technicians hidden inside the belly of this thing operating pulleys to make the eyes roll and the jaw snap while literally pumping actual dangerous fire through a hose in its neck. The actor, Paul Richter, had to genuinely interact with this massive, terrifying machine. To a modern eye, looking back at the commitment to practical magic, explaining how they pulled off these illusions, it is properly breathtaking.
Are you joking?
Yeah.
Breathtaking. I will grant you that it is an impressive achievement in stage design and mechanical engineering. The source book even explicitly states it's one of the most impressive in cinema history, noting that the castles and the replicas don't look lifeless in their construction. But the film itself feels entirely lifeless. The aesthetic they chose completely crushed the human element. The actors don't act, mate, they pose. It's the 1924 equivalent of being swallowed by your own living room. They're completely dominated by the matter around them. It's rigid. It is entirely suffocated by the Art Deco style.
I happen to love Art Deco. It's clean, it's symmetrical, it's visually satisfying.
It's fine for a building. Art Deco was popular from about 1910 to 1939. If you look at the Chrysler Building in New York, right? It's geometric, it's sleek, it's modern, it's obsessed with sharp lines and industrial progress. But why on earth are you applying the aesthetic of the Chrysler Building to a 13th century myth about dragons, mist, and swords?
It gives it order.
Imagine a forest where every single tree looks like it was carved with a ruler. Perfectly straight, aggressively symmetrical, with absolutely no natural chaos. It makes the whole thing feel completely sterile. And the source book nails this exactly. It points out the heavy, overwhelming influence of Arnold Böcklin.
This painter.
Exactly. The Swiss painter who was entirely obsessed with mythology and death. If we connect this to the bigger picture, you look at his most famous painting, Isle of the Dead. It is gloomy, fatalistic, completely still, and entirely devoid of warmth. You have these dark cypresses, a single white figure on a boat, perfectly still water. Lang adopts this exact, oppressive style and abandons all the psychological and humanist tones he had so carefully developed in his previous films.
He didn't abandon them, he elevated them into myth.
He replaces human vulnerability with this stiff, hieratic vision. It is just characters walking slowly, deliberately, through massive symmetrical sets. There's absolutely no humor. None. Zero. It is an utter void of anything resembling a human laugh or a casual moment.
Hear me out. The complete lack of humor is a bold, intentional, artistic choice. It was a myth, not a romantic comedy. You don't read the Epic of Gilgamesh looking for a punchline. Lang structured this massive epic into 14 song-like sequences.
Yes, I read the book too.
7 in part 1, 7 in part 2. That symmetry, that relentless marching pacing. It's deliberate. It's meant to feel like a visual poem. You are meant to feel the crushing, inevitable weight of destiny pressing down on these characters. It's not meant to be a laugh-a-minute joyride. It is the story of gods and kings.
Kings who behave like absolute sociopaths, if we're being entirely honest. Let's actually look at the story of part 1, Siegfried, because you're calling this a blueprint for the hero's journey. And I'm looking at a protagonist who is, frankly, a morally bankrupt fraud.
A fraud. He is the immaculate hero, Siegfried, played by Paul Richter. He is the son of King Siegmund. He rocks up to the forest. He vanquishes the dragon Fanfur, that beautiful, terrifying mechanical dragon we just talked about. And then he bathes in its hot blood to become completely invulnerable.
Right, bathing in the blood of a dead beast. Very noble. But of course, as with all ancient myths, there's a catch.
There is a catch. A single linden leaf falls from a tree above and lands right on his back while he's bathing. It sticks to his skin, meaning the magical blood doesn't touch that one specific tiny spot. So he emerges completely invincible, except for this one hidden vulnerability right between his shoulder blades.
Which is just terribly cliche, isn't it? I mean, let's pause and draw the explicit historical parallel here. It's Achilles.
The Greek hero.
Yes, from Homer's Iliad. It's the exact same mechanic. Achilles is dipped into the magical river Styx by his mother to make him invulnerable, but because she has to hold on to him, she holds him by the heel. The water doesn't touch his heel. So what happens? He gets shot in the heel with a poisoned arrow, and he dies. The concept of the tragic flaw, the hamartia, materializes a physical weak point. We literally use the phrase Achilles' heel to describe a fatal weakness today.
It's an archetype.
Lang and von Harbo aren't doing anything groundbreaking here. They're just lifting an ancient, well-worn mythological trope, filing off the serial numbers, and sticking a linden leaf on it. It's lazy storytelling.
It's not lazy, it's archetypal. It's how foundational myths work. They speak to universal human anxieties about vulnerability. And the story gets so much more complex. After slaying the dragon, Siegfried steals the massive treasure of the Nibelungs, who are these strange dwarfs from the land of mist. Having secured his wealth and his invulnerability, he then travels to Worms.
The city of Worms, to be clear, not the invertebrates.
Right, obviously, the grand city of Worms, to present himself at the court of King Gunther, played by Theodor Loos. Now, Siegfried has heard of Gunther's sister, the beautiful Kriemhild, played by Margarethe Schoen, and he wants to marry her. And King Gunther says, "Sure, you can marry my sister, but there's a condition."
There's always a condition in these stories.
Gunther wants to marry the bellicose, incredibly powerful, fiercely independent Icelandic queen Brunhild, played brilliantly by Hannah Ralph, by the way. But Brunhild has a strict rule. She will only marry a man who can defeat her in physical combat. And Gunther isn't exactly the warrior type, he's weak. So Siegfried agrees to help him cheat.
And here we go.
Siegfried uses a magic cloak of invisibility that he took from the Nibelungs. He stands right behind Gunther during the physical trials, completely invisible, and basically puppeteers him. He throws the spear for him, he lifts the massive stone for him, allowing Gunther to defeat Brunhild and claim her as his prize.
You can't be serious. You are sitting there defending this man as the immaculate hero. Look at the sheer moral bankruptcy of what you just described. He uses magical, godlike powers to trick a woman into a forced marriage with a man who couldn't even beat her in a fair fight.
It's just part of the...
He completely removes her agency, he defrauds her of her choice, He gaslights her into submitting to a weaker king, and we, the audience, are supposed to root for this guy. He's an absolute fraud.
Wait, okay, I actually never thought about it like that. When you lay it out, yes, he is essentially using mythological powers to gaslight a woman into a forced marriage. Okay, that is incredibly dark. But look, it was the era's standard mythological trope. You can't judge the ethics of a 13th century German epic by modern ethical standards.
I absolutely can, and I am.
The point Lang is making isn't about the nuance of the ethics. The point is the visual storytelling. Lang uses this incredible pioneering visual shorthand to tell you exactly who is good and who is bad, completely bypassing the messy morality. He puts the supposedly immaculate Siegfried in pure, blinding white clothing. He is literally radiant. And then you have the true villain, Hagen Tronje, played by Hans Adelbert von Schlettow, dressed in stark, brooding, heavy black. It's an immediate primal contrast. Good and evil, light and dark. You don't need a monologue to understand their roles, you just look at them.
It's completely simplistic. It treats the audience like children.
It is effective. It was so incredibly effective that it literally changed the visual language of cinema forever. Sergei Eisenstein, the legendary Russian director, saw Nibelungen and was so absolutely gobsmacked by the visual power of that black and white contrast that he borrowed it.
You improved it more like?
Well, he twisted it. In his film Alexander Nevsky, Eisenstein reverses it. He puts the evil, invading Teutonic knights in pure, stark white, making them look cold, sterile, and terrifying. And he directly borrowed Lang's spatial arrangements. The rigid way characters are blocked and positioned inside those massive, oppressive rooms for his masterpiece, Ivan the Terrible. You simply cannot deny the cinematic influence.
I don't deny the visual influence. The aesthetics are undeniably foundational, fine. What I deny is the moral substance. And the moral substance of this story completely falls apart the moment you apply even a tiny bit of critical thinking. Let's pose a riddle to the listener right now. Let's put you, the person listening to this, in this exact situation.
Oh, this is the fallout, the catastrophic, unavoidable fallout.
Exactly. So we have a double wedding. Gunther marries the deceived Brunhild, and Siegfried marries Kriemhild. But eventually, the truth always comes out. Kriemhild accidentally discovers the reality. She finds out that her husband, Siegfried, used the invisible cloak to trick Brunhild into submitting to Gunther. And here is the moral trap for you. Do you reckon you'd stay quiet if you were in her shoes?
That's a tough one.
Your husband has just orchestrated a massive, deeply unethical deception to force another woman into a marriage she didn't want. Do you keep that secret to protect your family's newfound power and your husband's reputation? Or do you spill it? I'm not so sure I would stay quiet.
Well, Kriemhild certainly doesn't stay quiet, because Brunhild, who is already incredibly suspicious and fiercely protective of her own status, provokes her. They have this massive public clash of egos on the steps of the cathedral, and Kriemhild just snaps. She reveals the entire deception right there. She tells Brunhild that Gunther is a fraud, and that it was actually Siegfried who defeated her in Iceland.
Which is entirely justified. Brunhild has been lied to, she's been humiliated, and she has been forced into a marriage under entirely false pretenses. So what does she do? She demands justice. She demands that her husband, King Gunther, has Siegfried killed to restore her honor.
And this is where Hagen Tronje, the man in stark black, steps in to do the dirty work. He acts as the ultimate traitor. He plays brilliantly on Kriemhild's love for her husband. He goes to her and says, "Look, I want to protect Siegfried in the upcoming battle, but I don't know where his hidden vulnerable spot is. You should sew a little cross on his tunic right over the exact spot where the linden leaf fell so I know exactly where to guard him."
Which is a brilliantly manipulative, psychologically astute move. This actually raises an important point. Hagen is arguably the only character in this entire rigid Art Deco emotionless film who actually possesses any real psychological depth or realism. He isn't a magical hero, he is a ruthless political operator. He sees a massive threat to the kingdom's stability, a threat to his king's authority, and he takes calculated steps to neutralize it. I find his cold pragmatism infinitely more compelling than the supposedly immaculate fraud of Siegfried.
He's a classic unredeemable villain. He takes Siegfried out on a hunting trip in the forest. He waits until Siegfried is tired, thirsty, and completely unarmed, bending down to drink water from a natural stream. And then Hagen takes a spear and literally stabs him in the back, driving it right through the little cross Kriemhild had lovingly sewed onto his tunic. It is the ultimate cowardly betrayal.
It's politics. Brutal, unforgiving, but entirely necessary from his perspective to maintain the balance of power.
Well, it sets up the absolute mental chaos of Part 2, and this is where the film just explodes. Part 2, Kriemhild's Rush. If part one is this slow, dignified, symmetrical, architectural fairy tale about innocence being destroyed, part two is a pure, unadulterated, chaotic study of a woman's vengeance. And the tonal shift is staggering. Suddenly the film becomes stormy, somber. The sets are no longer perfectly clean. They are eccentric, jagged. The camera movements become wilder. It is a completely different beast.
It has to be a different beast because the story goes entirely off the rails.
Yeah.
Kriemhild's beloved husband is dead, murdered by her own family's chief advisor with her brother's silent consent. She is consumed by the need for revenge. So what does she do? She decides she needs an ally. She decides to marry King Etzel.
Right.
Do you know who King Etzel actually is in the historical context of the Song of the Nibelungs?
Attila the Hun.
Yes. Attila the Hun. Let's just weave a bit of the actual history in here because understanding who Etzel represents completely changes the stakes of her decision. Attila the Hun. Born somewhere around 406 CE, died 453 CE. He was the fearsome ruler of the Huns, and he built a nomadic empire of staggering size. We are talking about a territory that stretched from the Netherlands in the west all the way to the Ural River in the east, from the Danube down to the Baltic.
The massive empire.
He is the ultimate symbol in European history of terrifying cruelty, unstoppable violence, and utter destruction. We are talking about the man whose forces absolutely terrified the Roman Empire, a man associated with the burning of entire civilizations. He's the boogeyman of antiquity. And Kriemhild looks at this unparalleled warlord and thinks, ah, yes, the perfect second husband. Why on earth would she marry the ultimate symbol of historical violence just to get back at her brother?
Because she needs an army. She needs raw, overwhelming power. It's a brilliant, terrifying strategy. She knows her family in Worms is too powerful to take on alone. So she marries Attila Etzel in the film. She has a son with him to secure her position, and then she meticulously sets her trap. She invites her brother, King Gunther, and the traitor Hagen to travel out to Etzel's distant palace for a grand celebration.
Come over for a grand feast and completely ignore the fact that my new husband is known historically as the Scourge of God. And the astonishing thing is they fall for it.
They turn up, they walk right into the lion's den, and Kriemhild goes to Etzel and says, "Right, the men who murdered my first husband are here. Kill them." And Etzel surprisingly says no. He refuses to break the sacred laws of hospitality. He states that he absolutely will not murder guests who have eaten under his own roof.
Attila the Hun, suddenly a stickler for polite dinner etiquette. Unbelievable.
So, denied by her husband, Kriemhild takes matters into her own hands, and she causes an absolute shambles. When I say shambles, I mean the film descends into absolute apocalyptic chaos. The grand feast turns into a horrifying massacre. Swords are drawn, blood is spilled over the banquet tables. Her own brothers are dying right in front of her. The Huns and the Burgundians are just relentlessly slaughtering each other in this incredibly claustrophobic space. And Kriemhild just watches coldly, entirely devoid of any mercy. Eventually, the entire massive palace is set on fire. It burns to the ground in this incredible sequence. And in the fiery wreckage, amidst the smoke and the bodies, Kriemhild herself steps forward and personally strikes down Hagen. She finally gets her revenge.
Wait. Hold on just a second. Let me stop you there. Good. Think about the sheer scale of the collateral damage. She goes through all of that. She marries Attila the Hun. She orchestrates a massive geopolitical crisis. She facilitates the slaughter of her own brothers. She burns down an entire palatial complex. And what about the treasure? The vast Nibelung treasure that Siegfried stole in part one, which was the source of so much of their power.
Well, Hagen had hidden it.
Exactly. Hagen, anticipating her wrath, took the entire treasure and hid it in the murky depths of the River Rhine. And he dies without ever revealing where it is. So she burns the world to the ground, she kills everyone, she loses her entire family, and she still doesn't get the gold back. That's completely absurd. It's a completely hollow victory. What was the point of any of it?
The gold doesn't matter. She achieved her main objective. She didn't care about the wealth, she cared entirely about avenging Siegfried. The sourcebook actually says it perfectly. It states that she achieved her main objective and can now die in peace. That is what makes it a perfect closed-loop tragedy. And the way Lang executes this final sequence is mind-blowing. The rhythm of the editing in this final massacre is a nightmare, in the best possible way. Lang is using the absolute cutting edge of 1920s technical wizardry to induce a literal physiological panic attack in the audience.
Right, the rhythmic editing. Much like Abel Gance's work in The Wheel, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly like The Wheel. For the listener, The Wheel was a French film from 1923 by Abel Gance. He pioneered this technique of rapid-fire rhythmic editing. He would cut the film faster and faster, leaving shots on screen for shorter and shorter fractions of a second. Mechanically, what this does is force the viewer's brain to process information at an accelerating rate, which literally causes the human heart to mimic the escalating pumping of a steam engine shown on screen. Lang is doing the exact same mechanical trick here with the violence. It's not just a narrative you are watching, it's a physiological assault on your nervous system. The chaos, the overwhelming sensory overload is the point. And right in the middle of all this aggressive editing, you have the film's true masterpiece, the nightmare sequence.
Oh yes, the animated hawks.
Yes. Kriemhild's prophetic nightmare, which heavily foreshadows Siegfried's death early on. Lang uses Walter Ruttman's incredible animation skills to show two massive, jagged black hawks viciously attacking a single pure white dove. It is entirely unrealistic lighting, it is stark, it is brutal, it's purely symbolic, and it perfectly encapsulates the entire mood and thesis of the film. The unequivocal, crushing distinction between good and evil, light and dark.
Good and evil, black and white. It's just so incredibly childish. It reduces complex human morality to a cartoon. And this brings us right back to the foundation of our argument, the source book you keep citing. Cinema, the Magic Vehicle, Journey 1.
The absolute Bible of early cinema history.
Well, if you're treating it as the Bible, then let's look at the actual numbers printed in the book, because any critical analysis of this film simply cannot ignore the sheer, brutal, physical reality of sitting through it. The book explicitly lists the physical length of this film, 6,792 meters of celluloid film.
It's an epic. It needs room to breathe.
It's a psychological endurance test. 3,216 meters for part 1, 3,576 meters for part 2. Let's translate that for the listener. If you sat down to watch this in 1924, you were locked in a theater on a hard wooden seat for nearly 5 straight hours. That is the length of 2 modern bloated Marvel movies played back to back, but without a single joke, without a single spoken word of dialogue, just a silent, slow, hieratic, humorless crawl towards death. It is an unbearable slog. The book attempts to be polite about it, calling the pacing dignified, but read between the lines. It is a massive, incredibly expensive exercise in studio self-indulgence.
I hear what the book reckons, but I think they've missed the point entirely. And I think you're missing the point. You are looking at a 1924 film with a 2026 TikTok-fried attention span. To a modern eye, if you can actually force yourself to sit down, put your phone away, and adjust your internal frequency to the rhythm of the era, the absolute commitment to the physical spectacle is blood brilliant. They didn't have CGI to just copy-paste an army of 10,000 Huns. They had to physically organize, feed, and direct hundreds of actual human extras. They had to physically sew those costumes. N. Wilcom and Paul Gert-Gadarian had to design the clothing to perfectly reflect the rigid, geometric madness of the sets. They built entire mythology from scratch with wood, paint, plaster, and light.
They built a very pretty, very expensive, entirely empty box. That is my fundamental issue with the Nibelungen. It is all surface. It's a stunning, unprecedented surface, I will grant you that. The lighting, the architecture, the sheer scale of the resources thrown at the screen, thanks to the Decla Bioscope and UFA merger, it's undeniably historically significant. But it has no soul. It's just archetypes walking slowly towards their inevitable death.
The soul is in the sheer ambition. The soul is in a defeated, broken nation trying to physically dream up invincible heroes again to survive their reality.
Well, if you listening out there want to step up and stop being just a passive consumer of media, don't just take his word for it. And don't just take my word for it either. Go seek out the real history. Look at the incredibly gritty, volatile political reality of the Weimar Republic. Look up Erich Palmer and see what other monumental projects he produced during that era of hyperinflation. Actually read Cinema, the Magic Vehicle. Look at the full credits. Understand the lengths they went to mechanically, the artistic compromises they made. Do you dare actually engage with the complex history instead of just blindly swallowing the studio-produced myth?
I say the myth is the history. The myth is what survives the centuries. You can have your cynical, pedantic historical breakdown, but I will take a 6,000-meter mechanical dragon epic that swings for the fences over a cynical reality any day of the week.
Clearly. You just spent the last hour aggressively defending a man who uses a magic cloak to gaslight a woman into a forced marriage.
I'm defending the power of cinema.
You're defending a spectacle designed to distract. But let me leave the listener with this final, unprompted thought to chew on. Forget 1924 for a second. Think about the film you watched last week. The latest multi-million-dollar superhero film or sci-fi epic or fantasy franchise. Look very closely at who is wearing the pristine white suit. And look at who is cloaked in the brooding dark shadows. Look at the massive computer-generated cities burning to the ground while the supposedly immaculate hero looks on.
And ask yourself, has modern cinema actually evolved its moral storytelling at all since Fritz Lang laid this blueprint down? Or are we still just sitting in the dark, happily being distracted by the modern equivalent of an incredibly expensive studio-built mechanical dragon?
Brilliant. Absolutely mental. Good night.